Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Actually, let me pull this up. Can I be heard in the back of the room? Not really. All right, let me pull this up a little bit closer then. Do I have to push? Can you hear me now? They don't amplify?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll speak really loudly. How's that? Welcome to the February 7th, 2019 meeting of the Metropolitan Policy Committee, and we'll begin with introductions. I'm Lucy Vennis, Mayor of Eugene, and I will turn to my right.
Hi, I'm Sarah Maderi, City of Eugene Public Works Director.
Lynn Taylor, Minutes Recorder.
Hi, I'm Carl Ye, President for the LTD Board.
AJ with Lane Transit District.
Franny Brindle with ODOT.
Jill Johnston, ODOT.
Paul Thompson, LCOG.
Brenda Wilson, the Executive Director of LCOG and the Central Lane MPO, and I would like to welcome Mayor Smith here as a guest. Thank you so much for coming.
Ann Hayes, City of Coburg.
Ray Smith, Mayor.
Patty Giannone, City of Coburg.
Dan Hurley, Lane County Public Works Director.
Joe Burney, Lane County Commissioner for 29 days, but it feels like longer.
Pete Sorensen, Lane County Commissioner, South Eugene District.
Gino Grimaldi, City of Springfield.
Joe Fisher, Springfield City Councilor.
Christine Lundberg, Mayor Springfield.
Thank you. And now we can, if the folks in the audience would like to introduce themselves, we'll start with the gentleman to the left there.
Steve Thompson, Construction Project Manager for ODOT.
Sean Marcus, Lane Transit District.
Tom Boyle, City of Springfield. Neil Lazati, City of Springfield.
Anna Newman, City of Springfield. Trish Brand, Point to Point, Lane Transit District.
Sid Chef, Bethel Safe Routes School.
Dan Collis, LCOG.
Jeff Crittens,
Tom Schwartz, LTD.
Joe Dezakowski, LD.
Eddie Kepler, Lane County.
Arlene Riley, River Road.
Jolene Simpson, River Road.
Rob Zako, Best.
Claire Rock, Best. Sasha Markanian, Lane County. Kelly Clark, Elkhart.
Kate Wilson, Elkhart.
Drew Pepperly, LCOG.
Ellen Courier, Elkhart.
Lot Millie, D'Angela, Safe Routes to School, Springfield.
Chip Decker,
Did you introduce? Yeah, 'cause- Okay, thank you all very much for being here. And I think the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look at those? Any corrections, adjustments? Can I have a motion? Somewhere?
I move
Someone?
we accept the minutes from the, which meeting was that?
November.
November 1st meeting, as they're presented.
Second? Is there a second? Please, someone second?
I wasn't here, so I would, but I'll second it, but I wasn't here.
That would be great. That would be great. Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. We got through that. Okay. Next up is, are there any adjustments to this menu? This menu? Yes, the menu. Any adjustments to this agenda? No? Okay. Comments from the audience. Do we have a, there we go. Thank you. Okay. First up is Carlene Riley.
Yeah, I do. Madam Chair, I'd like to start before Ms. Riley gets up here and just remind the MPC that in February of 2017, Ms. Riley presented public testimony to this body, and she talked about a River Road resident who had some pretty close calls, and I think that Ms. Riley might be talking about that resident again today.
Thank you.
But just wanted to remind everyone that she's been here before and she presented testimony on this very issue.
Thank you.
I've spoken about Irene more than once here. I'm Carlene Riley, 395 Marion Lane in River Road. Good morning, transportation thinkers and doers, and welcome to the new MPC members. And thanks to Paul for printing out my readout because I had technological gods against me today. In 15 years, I rarely commented except on topics of particular importance. My friend Irene Ferguson is dead. A vehicle hit her in Santa Clara on January 17th as she walked on Hunsaker that dark, rainy night. Ironically, another vehicle hit her in River Road and Hunsaker crosswalk about 10 years ago. In that incident, her bad leg was broken and her good foot seriously injured. In the 1980s, an auto crash in Florida resulted in Irene's permanent leg impairment and brain trauma. This tragic culmination of vehicular injuries is for just one person is incomprehensible. Her life revolved around transportation, and she died at transportation's mercy. The neighborhood does appreciate the short-term efforts that Becky Taylor has taken to deploy speed feedback signs on Hunsaker. Your packet contains background information, so I won't reiterate the whole sad situation. Let's emphasize putting safety first. ODOT identified safety as top priority over all other values. Transportation staff and elected officials promote safety, but easily get caught up in projects' costs, opposition to projects, complications in building sidewalks, protected bikeways, or public transit. Please put safety first, last, and always. First, let's name the new Santa Clara Transit Station Ferguson Crossing to keep Irene's death in front of our community's mind. Irene was injured trying to cross the road 10 years ago. She made a crossing of another kind this year, 3 weeks ago. Second, reduce neighborhood speed limits when requested by neighbors. Third, install sidewalks and safe bike lanes as necessary safety features for the general community. Fifth, prepare a rapid response package of temporary safety measures that can be rolled out immediately. Sixth, streamline the implementation of permanent safety measures to protect the people. Currently, River Road Santa Clara neighborhood has a planning effort going on with 5 transportation projects right in that area. They are in various stages of completion. Moving ahead is to select corridors for either enhanced or MX services. River Road Corridor study to assess housing and commercial build-outs and ensuing traffic increases. A project at River Road and Irving Hunsaker to add dedicated turn lanes and updated signal equipment. Santa Clara Transit Station to replace the current station on property in River Road. It will be located between Green and Hunsaker. Improvements to Beaver Hunsaker from Division to River Road with sidewalks, bike paths, crosswalks, and traffic signals. We can do better. And now we have an opportunity to integrate these projects and implement essential safety measures. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and very compelling. Thank you, Carlene.
Our neighborhood is hurting.
Yes. Jolene Simpson.
Hello, good morning. My name is Jolene Simpson. I'm a River Road Community Organization member, long-term resident of River Road, former co-chair of River Road Community Organization, and currently on the Transportation Working Group for our neighborhood planning process. Thank you for this opportunity to speak this morning. My remarks today reflect my ongoing concern for the protection of pedestrians and cyclists on our roadway. As we consider future transportation needs and policy decisions, I would encourage you to examine every new development proposal, every new transportation corridor review, and every pedestrian cyclist safety concern through the lens of Vision Zero goals. My neighbor, my friend, Irene Ferguson, was killed as she walked along Hunsaker on a dark and rainy night. She was an advocate for safer streets, better roadway lighting, and safer pedestrian crossings in the River Road and Santa Clara neighborhoods. Reducing roadway speed and improving roadway lighting on both county and city roads will go a long way towards improving safety in my neighborhood. Without sidewalks, which is true on many streets in River Road and Santa Clara, there really is no place to walk but in the road. Irene was in the road when she was struck by an automobile and killed. As we wait for future funding and more extensive safety improvements, simply reducing the speed limit to 20 or 30 miles per hour and enforcing these speed reduction measures on main streets and arterial side streets will go a long way towards added safety. Going forward, with any future large developments and scattered infill, which is planned for our neighborhood, system development charges and other transportation funding must be dedicated to pedestrian and bike safety, as well as other auto-related impacts. And this is true not only for the roadway that is adjacent to the development, but also roadways that intersect with these arterials. Irene's death is a tragedy that could have been prevented. Let it be a clarion call for creative thinking and quick action to create a safer transportation for everyone in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker, Claire Roth.
Hi, my name's Claire Roth. I'm Safe Streets Coordinator with Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. First, I would like to thank Carlene and Jolene for remembering Irene. It's tragedies such as these, that's why BEST is doing our work in the community. I wanted to share with you all a few things that BEST has been working on in the past couple of months that I've been involved with. The first is a World Day of Remembrance video that we put together. Thank you for, Lucy Venice, thank you for your participation in that video. Is that already on the computer? Yeah. Okay. I don't know, is it?
If it's the correct one, let's see if it's going to work for you.
And so this video is made in a nod to the World Day of Remembrance, which is seen as the appropriate way to honor and remember victims of traffic fatalities.
Let's see if it's going to.
Okay. And if it chooses not to play, then it's also available on our Facebook page. Oh.
I don't know if we have sound, though. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Do you know if the sound is?
Yeah, there's a slider on that.
Yeah, I can't read from
It's
here.
the next one.
Can you read it from here?
So we could just go ahead and play it, and I can kind of just talk through what's going on
there we
if the
go.
sound doesn't work.
I think the slider inside the video needs to be pulled over on the far right.
Thank you, Sarah.
Oh my God. Can we still turn it up?
That's it.
Turn the volume up on those little speakers?
So, yeah, the volume's not very good, but basically what we did is asked members of our community and community leaders to share their own personal values behind transportation safety and really push the idea that we need to be a joined community, you know, Eugene, Springfield, and the wider Lane County area in order to make our streets safer for everybody. And we asked folks to talk about three main efforts: to obey speed limits, to not drive distracted, and to drive sober. So that's what that video is about. And you can also actually hear it on our Facebook page. Aside from the video, we also worked on an effort with Mothers Against Drunk Driving and the Technology Association of Oregon to offer discounted rides on New Year's Eve with Uber and Lyft and Oregon Taxi. And that was a success. There was many hundreds of people who took us up on that effort. And lastly, I'd like to add that I am working with the friendly area neighbors to put together a walk audit, and that will be happening on February 16th, which is a week from this coming Saturday. Information about that can be found on our Facebook page and FAN's Facebook page as well. I invite anyone who's interested to come out and join. A walk audit is a great way to gather community-driven information about the walkability and safety on our streets. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, it's excellent to hear that report after acknowledging a loss of a activist and through an unnecessary accident. So one that we all wish to avoid. Are there comments from anybody else in the committee? Comments responding to the public comment? Okay. All right. We now move into elections. So we need to elect new chair and vice chair, correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair. The MPC's bylaws call for the election of the chair and the vice chair at the first meeting of the year. That would be this one. And the bylaws also call for the chair and the vice chair to be chosen from the jurisdictions of either Lane County, Eugene, or Springfield. While it's not in the bylaws, historically, it has been the vice chair who moves up to the chair, and then the jurisdiction that was not the chair or the vice chair to move into the vice chair slot. And so, of course, that's up to you, and you can take it.
And so that rotation this year, I was the vice chair last year.
Correct.
And so then it revolves to Mayor Lundberg as vice chair this year? If we follow that standard rotation.
Correct. That is how it has historically worked.
Right. So I guess we need nominations, correct? So we'll begin with the chair. Nominations for chair? Are you raising your hand?
No.
No.
I'm happy to be the chair. No, but
You can't, I know, you just had this, like, you were going to say something.
I'll nominate Mayor Venus for chair.
I second.
Okay. Any other?
We can move this along.
Think we can move this along. Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you all very much. It was a hard-fought campaign, and I'm grateful for all your support.
Vice chair.
Second.
Thanks a lot. I wanted to have an opportunity to, once in my life, support Mayor Lundberg.
I just want to start the meeting.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations.
Thank you.
Pleasure working with you. Okay, now we carry on. Our first item of business.
Madam Chair, we still have to choose or appoint the OMPOC members. So OMPOC is the statewide MPO consortium, and we have traditionally had a representative and an alternate attend those meetings and represent, usually two of them do. Yeah, two members. Represent the Central Lane MPO on the statewide committee.
The current members are Mayor Lundberg and Kate Reed from LTD, who's not present today, and certainly they are eligible to continue as your OMPOC representatives, but there are two members that are formally appointed.
Do you want to speak to that? Are you interested in continuing?
I'm interested in continuing on the OMPA.
And do we know if Kate Reed has expressed an interest in continuing?
She has expressed that interest.
Okay. Okay. Is anyone else desiring to take on that role? No other nominations? Okay. So can we just vote for both of them at the same time?
Yes.
So
Can I ask a question? I recall that acronym from my prior time here, but could you go into some more detail on who else is on the Oregon MPO consortium?
The Oregon MPO consortium is now a formal body, has been for about a dozen years now. It consists of two members from each of the Oregon MPOs that are appointed by those MPO policy boards to serve on the policy board of the consortium. So like the two that you're appointing today, each of the other Oregon MPOs appoints two members. There have been Over almost all of that history, 8 of the Oregon MPOs participating in the consortium, because there are 8 MPOs that are wholly contained within Oregon. There are actually 3 other MPOs that are bi-state between Oregon and Washington, with the majority of the population in Washington. Just within the past year, one of those has started participating in Ampo, so we now have 9 MPOs that are members.
Thank you.
Okay, we need a motion. We need a motion to approve.
I'd like to make a motion to keep 2 representatives of this committee on that same committee in the state.
Second? Someone second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed? All right, congratulations. Thank you for continuing in that role, Mayor Lundberg. Okay, now, we're ready for the first issue on the agenda, item on the agenda, Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program Amendment.
Thank you. I'm Dan Collister with ALCOG. This item is a proposed amendment to the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. And since there are so many new faces, I will just explain briefly what that is. The Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, is the 4-year schedule of projects for our MPO. It includes federally funded projects and projects of regional significance. Any changes to those, importantly, it's fiscally constrained. And any changes to a project in the TIP requires approval from MPC, and MPC has delegated some of those, the authority to approve some of those amendments to the Transportation Planning Committee, but would like to keep the authority to approve the any amendments to projects that involve the MPO's discretionary funds, which include the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program, and the Transportation Alternatives Program. So this amendment involves 3 different projects, City of Springfield projects, all of which use MPO's discretionary funds, the CMAQ program and STBG. We're also requesting an expedited approval because the December and January meetings were canceled, and the City of Springfield is hoping to keep their schedules intact. And I'll go in more specifically about what is being requested with that expedited approval. But first, let me summarize the amendments as best I can. So as I said, these are 3 MPC-supported projects, all from the City of Springfield. The first is to use CMAQ funds, $290,000, to purchase a street sweeper. Because of some federal red tape, the city thought it might be most prudent to move those CMAQ funds to another project and then purchase the street sweeper with local funds. So those funds are proposed to go to the South 28th Street Dust Mitigation Project, which is already utilizing CMAQ funds. This is going for a needed right-of-way acquisition phase for that same project. Also, at the same time, the city would like to move roughly $400,000 of STBG funds from that same South 28th Street Dust Mitigation Project to the Mill Street Reconstruct Project, to reconstruct South A Street to Centennial Boulevard. Those funds would replace already programmed local overmatch funds, just switching out the local funds for federal funds. No change to the total project estimate. Along with those are the big changes, but to support those changes, there are a few other minor adjustments to the TIP, such as some phases slipping or advancing, and some project descriptions being updated. Page 2 of the cover memo for this item lists out each of the specific changes to each of the 3 projects. There are quite a few. If that's a little tough to digest, the Exhibit A is the 3-page table here. 1 page for each of the 3 projects being affected by the proposed amendment, the before conditions and after the amendment conditions, if that's a little easier. So the Transportation Planning Committee met December 19th to discuss this. They recommended the MPC approve this amendment, and let me speak to the expedited approval process. The typical process is TPC will recommend, and then we'll bring it to the next MPC meeting, where we'll have a public hearing and we'll open a 30-day public comment period. At the next MPC meeting, we request MPC action. So we're hoping for action at today's meeting. In anticipation of that, we opened a 30-day public comment period in January, which has now concluded. No comments were received, but we do request a public hearing at today's meeting and MPC action following the conclusion of that hearing.
Okay, excellent. So do we have anyone signed up to testify at the public hearing?
There is not.
No one. Okay. Any questions, comments, concerns from the committee regarding this? Okay. Are we ready to vote on the resolution? Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2019-1.
Second? Someone?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. That passes. Thank you very much for that report and that work.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Seems like it makes a lot of sense. So, good. Lot of work and makes sense. Okay. The next item, transit asset management performance measures.
Good morning. I'm Ellen Courier. I'm staff at Central Lane Npo, and this is Cheryl Munkish. She's from Lane Transit District. We're going to talk about transit asset management performance measures, but I kind of wanted to give a brief overview of where we are in all of our performance measure supporting and adopting. So I did bring kind of some background information about what we adopted over the past year. We have supported ODOT in their performance measures for safety, CMAC, freight, bridge, and pavement condition, and I can hand this out. It just kind of talks about what we've already supported, and ODOT will be taking on the role of collecting that data and reporting that to FHWA. What we're talking about today is the Federal Transit Authority performance measures. So we have one final measure that we need to take an action on, and we can do a similar thing to what we did for these performance measures. Is we can either come up with our own distinct performance measures, or we can support ODOT and their performance measures. And our transit district is actually included in a Tier 2 plan, transit asset management plan. What that means is that they're under a certain number of vehicles that are operating in a fixed service, and so they are covered under ODOT's transit asset management plan. So ODOT collects that data for them and reports that to the Federal Transit Authority. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Cheryl is kind of the expert on what LTD has done. They adopted the Tier 2 plan in November of last year. And so what we would be doing as a body is supporting LTD and supporting ODOT's transit asset management plan. And in your memo, it kind of goes over what those actual targets are. Those are directly pulled from what our current stock is. And we're trying to stay at that limit for future years. So on the page 2 of the memo is where those are our targets for the next year.
I'm happy to open up for questions, but I have a question first, which is I've gotten a little lost in the layers of this. So,
that's understandable.
So we've already approved the ODOT's transportation management, and now we're looking at federal measures that apply to federal highways. Is that
We've already done all of our requirements for federal highways. What we have not done is for Federal Transit Authority, and we as a body have not done anything on those particular performance measures yet. LTD has adopted them, and then we as the MPO that they participate in also need to acknowledge those as well.
Okay, thank you.
There are a lot of layers.
Thank you. Thank you.
If I can add one thing, one of the reasons that the federal regulations give you, the MPO, the option of either supporting the transit district's measures or developing and adopting the MPO's own is because many MPOs, the larger MPOs in particular, will have multiple transit districts in them. So they may need to take input from multiple transit districts and then develop their own measures. We're fortunate, we have one transit district. It covers all of the MPO. It makes sense for us to support their performance measures. What we're asking for you to do today is to listen to what those are, learn about them, give us some feedback. We'll come to you next month to take action on this.
Great. I do have one more question. I don't understand what these percentages mean on page 2.
And I think this is a little confusing because they each mean something slightly different. So there's different calculations for those within each category, and maybe Cheryl can provide some more information on that.
Sure. So the percentages that you see before you, these will be revamped annually every year in January. So I expect 2019 to be out fairly soon. How they derive at the 40%, let's say for rolling stock for our buses, is they've extracted actual data out of our Optus system that houses our inventory. And based on our current state of good repair, they have identified about where we're at and developed these measures. There's no penalty or perks not meeting your targets, exceeding or falling short at all. It's just based on actual data, and we're going to revamp those. What that 40% is saying is that we don't want more than our rolling stock, for example, our buses, to be more. We don't want more than 40% to be past the useful life of that bus. And that's defined by 12 years of 500,000 in this program. And so it tiers down for each type of asset that you see here. It's got an associated target based on actual data, and that's statewide. This is not just LTD. So it's a group plan for the state for all of the Tier 2 agencies. Does that help? I'm willing to take any other questions.
Go ahead, Patty.
So that almost helped. I'm missing a phrase or something. So are you saying you wouldn't want more than 40% of your buses to not be in good repair?
To be past that 12-year or 500,000 miles. So that's the useful life. So we want at least 40% or less to be younger than 12 years.
To be younger than 12 years?
Yeah. So we're rotating our stock throughout time, and we're not needing to replace 100%. So they want some kind of measure where some of them can be over the useful life, and some of them need to be under. And it's just a combination.
So the 40% are the ones that are over.
40% or under is where you want to be for your useful life.
40% is the upper limit.
It's a challenging concept, the way the targets were developed, but that's a national program, so we didn't select that approach.
It seems high. I must still be thinking of it wrong, because 40% to me, I mean, I would think you would want not more than 10% of your buses to be past their useful life.
Again, this is based on actual data of where our state of good repair currently is. And then within that, this is a decision-making tool where they can prioritize replacement of certain types of vehicles with state and federal money that passes through.
I think AJ wanted to add something.
Yeah, if I can just explain. So on the federal level, they're taking a national data, and what they're saying is, of those assets that are funded by the federal government, like, how are we doing in replacing them before they get too old, and you have a bunch of old buses or other types of equipment, buildings that are too old, some, just your assets that are as the feds talk about the infrastructure and the need to fund infrastructure and all of these assets, LTD, who's funded with federal dollars, they're basically looked at all of our assets and said, based on the condition of all of your buses and buildings and stations, this is what you should be establishing as a standard. And in the ideal world, we would be working and they would be funding us so that we replace our assets and we meet our thresholds. So this group, you guys are looking at saying, how, when we go and we talk like United Front, and we talk about it, we would use these numbers and saying, this is our condition of our assets, our buses, our equipment, and we need dollars to make sure we meet our targets. We don't get penalized if they don't give us the money, but it's a tool that allows us to talk about what is the condition of our infrastructure. So as we talk about how we're either getting federal dollars or local dollars to replace those assets and how are we doing, Cheryl's responsible for tracking them. So and we are part of the state's program. So we don't have to keep all of this administrative work. What the state has said is, LTD, you can do a data input and put every single bus and its age and its condition in there and how much it cost, and you are going to be part of the state of Oregon's program. And on a periodic level, we'll bring that information to say, here's how we're doing, and maybe we're doing a little bit better, and here's how we compare to the national average. So that's the type of information. So it's really just talking about assets and what percentage we are today, what our goals should be, and as we move forward is what do we want them to be, and how do we advocate for getting more funding to, or maybe we're doing better than other communities. So we'll continue to have the conversation, but I think the conversation you bring up is, should we really be at 40%? I mean, I think that's going to be the conversation as we learn more and more about how other communities are. How do we compare to them, and where should we be, or where do we want to be?
Okay. All right,
Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Counselor and then Commissioner.
And Paul.
And Paul. Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Go for it.
This is a little bit off base what you're talking about, but I first of all, I want to say that the importance of this is really fantastic. It's huge in regards to your fiduciary responsibility of running an agency, and I think that's a very important part. We're statutorily required to show fiduciary responsibility in our positions, and I think this is a clear example of doing that, so I commend you for going to the depth that you're doing that. I see an opportunity, though, I think, on the, for example, the MWMC, or Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission, is dealing with an asset management project now, seeing the importance of that and the value of budgeting down clear into the next decade. And I'm wondering, is there opportunities, or maybe I'm just asking if you can see opportunities to work with other agencies, the cities, and the agencies that have fleets and assets such as this to work together, because this is an expensive project and it takes a lot of staff time. But if there's tools or things in which you can learn from this and share, I would really highly encourage you to reach out to those other agencies and say, hey, we've got this tool, and I don't even know what your tool is. I mean, as far as if it's a computer program based thing, I assume it is, and working Excel sheets, et cetera. But I would really highly encourage you reaching out to other agencies and sharing this, because this is just invaluable, and for it to be not capitalized by other agencies and entities would be a shame. Thank you very much for your work.
Commissioner?
I want to pre-apologize, as I'm on the other end of not even knowing what all these initials mean, and I do apologize. And my question is going to be one that probably I as well. So, as I understand this, so I can track you, we're tracking how you're tracking something that's relatively arbitrary in terms of how the measures happen to be arrived at, but nonetheless, it gives people a common language for trying to move forward and solicit adequate resources. Am I kind of with you?
I think you said it better than I did, yes. Thank you.
No,
Yes.
thank you. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I apologize.
Okay, good. That was great. That's great, yeah.
I just want to say that, in my view, the useful life of a Lane County Commissioner is 12 years. And that between me being 11 years over that, and Joe being, 10.
12 years under that.
Well, we're really, really good in our asset management. Right?
Yes.
As an average.
And we would average you, you're exactly
Spot on.
correct. We would take your tenure, average it, and then set a standard. You're correct.
500,000 miles or 12 years.
Yes.
Thank you, because now I'm conceptually. And now I understand why Joe says this is just really on the.
Great. Christine?
So obviously, I've been doing this forever because I wrote down O.LTD okay. All right? I'm fine with the state version.
Advanced mayor, you don't even
That's
have
right,
to use
really.
words anymore.
No, I just
She wrote the
I just
resolution.
write down how I would vote. Okay.
We'll actually won't be taking action until next
Well,
month.
but I mean,
Yeah.
I'm letting you know,
Yep.
go for it then. We'll get to that point. Yes, okay.
Okay, everybody had their questions answered? Yes.
If I may, just one thing to build a little bit on what AJ said and Commissioner Burney. Keep in mind the origination of this and all the performance measures that we brought to you previously is the Federal Transportation Act that we're operating under now, the FAST Act from many years ago. This is congressional developed language. And so, as AJ said, it is important to have these statistics when you may go back on United Front to ask for dollars, but it's also important, really, the idea was that Congress, the U.S. Congress, wanted this information over the long term to see where they may need to direct more funding, to see where the needs may be, aren't being met or need more funding, et cetera. So it's really, that's where it originated, that's where ultimately this data goes, although it's useful at many levels before there.
Thank you for saying that. That's helpful. Understand why we're doing this work. Thank you very much. And thank you.
Thank you. And I'm just going to pass this around.
Excellent.
These are the previously adopted, supported, not adopted.
Okay. Next up is Transit Tomorrow.
Ellen is bringing up the presentation, I believe. I can say good afternoon. My name's Tom Schwetz. I'm the Director of Planning and Development LTD. And to distract you from my presentation, I'm going to pass around some useful information that you can use. One of the things that we're really trying to do now is have people take the online survey. And this card gives you a lot of good information about what Transit Tomorrow is and can help you in talking to your friends and neighbors and network about taking the online survey. So to begin with, we've been here a couple of times talking about Transit Tomorrow. And I want to just frame it again. What is Transit Tomorrow? Transit Tomorrow in industry speak, we call it a comprehensive operations analysis. It's an opportunity to look comprehensively, as the name implies, at our service. And in fact, why we're doing it is that we haven't done this kind of comprehensive look for quite a long time, in fact, about 20 years. And one of the things, if you're familiar with how we change service, there's been 3 or 4 ways in which we think about changing service. One is on an annual basis, we've been in our annual route review looking at different things, the way service is working over the past year, what do we need to fix, how do we kind of make things a little bit better. We've been making major changes to how we operate around the development of our MX service. So West Eugene, we did a major overhaul on how that service was deployed. And then for good or ill, in economic downturns, we've had to look at reducing service, and then it's kind of a hard slog back up to getting it back up. So this is an opportunity to take a step back from those approaches to looking at service and really look comprehensively and ask system level questions. And we'll be talking about a couple of key trade-offs today in terms of do we want to invest our money in ridership? Do we want to make sure that everybody has a little bit of service? And then looking at once we have that concept of a route design, what do our system look like? Then with respect to new revenue, new funding opportunities, how do we want to deploy those funds? And so I'm going to talk through that a little bit. And to start with, we have this again, we'll be coming back to this concept of ridership and coverage. And I have a diagram up here on the slides. that characterizes those two things. And on the right-hand side with the red lines and the bunch of buses around a couple of corridors, that's a ridership network. That's concentrating higher frequency, longer spans of service on a few corridors to really make, to use Jarrett Walker's term, transit more useful. On the other hand, you have coverage network, which gets some level of transit out to just about everyone. And the way to think about that is it's a shorter walk to service, but a longer wait because the frequencies are much lower. A ridership network, you have a longer walk perhaps, but a much shorter wait. And so we'll talk about what that trade-off looks like. The last time we came to you, we were actually in the middle of talking to the community through an online survey about just broader questions, this broader question of coverage and ridership. And so I want to talk about what we got out of phase one and how that kind of frames our second phase. So the public input from phase one really was a little, you could say it was split. Many people indicated they're interested in higher frequency and more interested in that than kind of the maximizing the spread of where service goes. But that's not a clear mandate because about a third of the participants in the survey were most interested in expanded coverage, and those tend to be folks that are older, folks that maybe have disabilities, and live, further out in the neighborhoods. And so that's why there's an interest in both kinds of service. And I would say as the board wrestles with this, they'll be balancing this coverage, ridership, and then kind of making our service more affordable or putting it into more service.
What about combining them and having frequent service snake through the areas where there's the greatest interest in ridership?
Well, there'll be some networks we can look at and talk more about that question. So the key questions that we took out of the first phase were, again, this ridership versus coverage. Is it frequent service with most riders or some service to many places? And then service versus affordability, using our new resources to increase service or to reduce the cost of getting getting on the bus. And again, as you'll see, I think there's a need for a balance, but we'll work through that. So this is a graphic of those trade-offs. Again, the system design is embedded in the horizontal trade-off there, higher ridership, higher coverage. And then the vertical axis has this trade-off between, how do we make the service more affordable, but then also how do we add service to make the service more useful. This is what our existing network looks like today, and there's a mix of frequencies. You see the MX lines winding through the region, and then we have some high-frequency, Main Street's a high-frequency corridor, River Road, the route out to LCC. With the higher ridership design, we have a lot more of the red higher frequency lines, and we also this option had an idea of creating what we called kind of the transit belt line around the region, and that's that blue line that kind of snakes around parallel with Beltline itself, and that probably gets closest to what Pete was talking about in terms of having some frequency that connects a lot of people. And the virtue of this connection route is that it actually, if you think about all those connections to that being 15-minute service, and we're running half an hour service on that blue line, it's a really good way to connect people across the region. So that was the higher ridership design. The key outcomes relate to proximity. So in terms of proximity, fewer people are near any service, but many people a lot more people are near frequent service, and so that was kind of the essential trade-off there. And you can see 38% more people are within a half-mile frequent service. A graphic way our consultants prepared to help us look at that at the region as a whole is looking at, and there are a lot of different ways you could look at this, but this one is looking at job access. And the darker green hexagons means there's more jobs reachable from that area within 45 minutes. There's some of the darker brown area where that relates to kind of South Eugene, and there's no transit service there under this high ridership network. And so that illustrates some of the benefits, also some of the trade-offs of this design. Again, just to get in your mind what the existing network looks like, and then looking at the high coverage network, you see there's a lot more routes spread out across the region. Again, we still have the MX line and River Road, Main Street, and route out to LCC as frequent, so 15-minute service. But there's a lot more half-hour and maybe 6-trip-a-day types of service, similar to what we have today. That's just covering more places. One of the key outcomes here, obviously, there are a few more people near fixed route service than we have today. That's because we operate a pretty good coverage network today. 70% of residents are within a quarter mile, and 79% of jobs are within a quarter mile service. And then there's reduced frequency in some areas. So those are the two trade-offs in terms of ridership and coverage. So I want to talk, I'm sorry, here's the outcomes, kind of a similar chart that looks at job access under this design. You can see a lot less green dots, so there's slightly less access to jobs overall, but there's still some areas that will see increase over today. So the other trade-off then is looking at more service versus lower fares. And these, again, these scenarios, the 4 scenarios are really developed to illustrate the ends, the kind of more extreme ends of things. So if we took all of our additional resource and put it into adding service, we could actually run a service that had the same schedule 7 days a week. And for a lot of people, that's a very good thing. If you work and you rely on transit, maybe you're in a service job, and usually service workers don't have a lot of weekends per se, so they're looking for weekend service, they're looking for later night service, and this is what you'd get out of that. So there'd be a 50% increase in our weekend service to do that. But on the other side, fares wouldn't change very much. On the other end of it, if we focused all that resource on lowering fares, our weekend service remains less frequent, but lower fares and more discounts are in place. The average fare could decrease by up to 50%. And just to lay this out, the board's given us direction to look at, in terms of lowering fares, reinstituting the student transit pass, a youth pass, as well as significantly increasing the subsidy for low-income fares. And so we've got that piece embedded in the decision-making that we're going to make, so we're already, as I indicated before, moving towards more of a balance. So you're not going to see likely decisions that are at those edges. This chart, I'm not going to go through it in any detail. It's in your packet. It's kind of in a reduced format. The 8.5 by 11 is still kind of small. But it does serve to illustrate some of the key outcomes, looking at weekends and weekdays. in terms of accessibility to either ridership or jobs for the 4 different scenarios. And so you can take a look at that and learn a little bit more. Another way that our consultants presented to give you a more visual sense of the trade-offs and the changes that you get from these different types of scenarios are these charts that look at the relative, what you could get to by transit in 45 minutes. And this happens to be looking at, if you were standing at Coburg Road in Cal Young, where could you get to? And the dark gray is the existing. The light blue is where there's additional access, transit access, so more places you could get to. And the gray areas are where you would not be able to get to. And so you can see comparison looking at high ridership and lower fares versus high coverage and lower fares in this particular graphic. And I would encourage you, if you're interested in this stuff, all this material is on our website. The website is on this handout. There's a lot more of these kinds of charts. You can kind of look at different parts of the region. We're doing this different times of day, different days of the week. It really gives you a good sense of how those trade-offs might work. And so with respect to the next steps in our process, again, like I said, we've completed the first phase of work, and we're currently engaged in the month of February in, again, getting some additional feedback on those scenarios. And based on those scenarios, the board's going to be talking about, we're going to be asking the board to give us some direction to help focus the next piece of our design work, which is bringing the consultants in and holding our second core design workshop, which again had representatives from people from around the table, the organizations from around the table, in looking at, spending a couple days with us looking at how best to take what we've heard, what the board directed, and coming up with what would be a final set of alternatives that we'd be taking to the board for adoption. And again, to reiterate, this project is going to, these decisions are going to lead to the development of a plan for the next 3 years in terms of how we deploy our resources. Again, trying to move in the direction that kind of came out of this process. So at this point, I ask if you have any questions. And again, there's the website if you want to have it that way.
Anyone in the queue? Mayor?
So Tom, this is what's going out now, or it's been out?
Yes, this
That's
type
going
of
out
thing.
now. Is there any other way for people to give input without having to go online for all the folks that, one is, I've been trying to hand out before, and give it to either people I know that ride the bus or
Right.
other people,
Yep.
and you always get that sort of
Like,
look like, I have to go online.
Right.
Is so, what other options do people have so that you have some way to get information that?
yeah, there's actually a whole suite of things.
So, Art McDowell, I work for Tom at LTE. So there's, in both phases, we've had a combined, okay. So we've done a few different things to try and, because acknowledging, our main tool is to have people take the online open house because this is complex information. We need, a little bit of time spent engaging with these concepts, that you can't have it all, that these are under a constrained budget, and they lead in opposite directions. So the online survey is really set up for that, but there are other ways. So we've had in-person events, we've given talks to different groups. There's been tabling at our stations where we've had basically what the online survey looks like, but imagine that on, a big sheet of paper that still has some of the key concepts, and then people are putting stickers sort of where they fit on, that scale of being either, more interested in high ridership type service or not so sure, maybe in the middle, or moving towards coverage service. And so that was another way that we got the types of results that we can combine with what we've heard, so that we're kind of comparing things on an equal level. And then there's been a lot of outreach to try and get people, actually to find out how we might better get the word out and get input from people. So we sent out things online, but also contacted people who represent affordable housing and different types of groups across our area to figure out how to best reach the people that they represent.
So do you do, because, we have this MX line out along International, always, trying to get people to ride the bus out there. So do you do any outreach to employers to try and say, can you get your employees, would they ride, would this encourage them? Because to me, it's one technique to find out, can I get somebody on the darn bus? That's driving to work every day and we want them to ride the bus? And
yes.
would this, is get their input about what would help persuade them?
We've reached out to those businesses also, and to the chambers to get a sense of how to reach businesses. The Cammie Harris, who's sort of our project manager for outreach for this project, she also manages the Group Pass program with the businesses out on International Way and other places, and so she's been talking to those folks, trying to see if we can get the survey out, which again, it's our main tool for people to engage with this information, but also to ask, is there other ways? Can we present? Can we host a workshop? And one thing I forgot also is next week at the EMU on Tuesday, because the first phase of outreach was in the middle of the summer, so we didn't get as many U of O students as we would imagine, or LCC students engaging with this. So we're having an in-person open house next Tuesday from 11 to 2, where we can go into more detail with this, and we'll have some iPads there where people can take the survey immediately, or also just be giving people the link.
So I had a couple other quick things too. Do you have, as part of this, is asking people, maybe when they get on the bus or whatever, where are you going? So that you have some sort of sense of, I'm going to work, I'm going to shop, I'm going to visit grandma, what are the, why are people getting on the bus? I mean, because what I see LTD having to make the decision is you've got to make decisions about, why are people getting on the bus, and how they're going here because they have to go to work and they don't have a car, or they're going to go shopping and they can do it anytime. So it's a little bit about when you offer service and how often. And I've got to walk, and I've got to walk with my grocery bags or whatever. There's decisions that people have to make internally about it. So I just thought, do you have actual information about ridership, why people are on the bus and where they're going and why?
We have some of that. So periodically we do what's called an origin and destination study. And so that's, I believe, every 4 years. The last time was 2015, so we're due for one in the fall of this year. And so we have that, the consultants that help put together these alternatives, some of the information that they're ingesting through the first phase of this project is the existing conditions. And so we're looking at ridership patterns. We know, how many people get on and off at stops, but it's hard to put together those dots of who individually got on and got off, and what that trip looks like, and things like what is the trip purpose about, what kind of income groups are these folks, and other questions that are a part of that. So we have a data set that we consult for all types of different things that we do at LTD, and that's the O&D data set, and our consultants were also using that. And then through the process of designing these networks, we're looking at more of the land use and what kind of activity is there, so if it's residents or jobs and what the balance of those things are when we're looking at where to deploy service, because there's a strong connection between where that service is and where it can get to. And so trip purpose I don't think is captured on our survey for part of this project. It's challenging we don't want to ask too many questions. We want to get as many results as possible, but we do have some more data as a result of taking the survey for us to sort of figure out what zip codes are folks in who have a different preference for service, and then a few other things about income and so forth.
Well, I just want to say to LTD, thank you for doing this, because I think it's very, very valuable in terms of trying to figure out the balance, because the best scenario would be really high frequency on a lot of routes, and knowing that that's not where you can get to, at least currently, is how do you balance it out? So I appreciate the work because I think it is very, very valuable, particularly to get to groups or get people to not do the single occupancy going to work or whatever it is we won't ever get there unless we try to figure out the system so it's actually convenient and get you where you want to go in a reasonable amount of time. So I appreciate that LTD is doing this project.
Yes, Commissioner.
I was just curious how much money it would cost to go to what the mayor just described, where we take the two options and we say, well, we'd really rather, for our community, for livability, for whatever, for energy efficiency, we'd really rather have both, rather than one or the other, or even a combination of the two. We want both. Have you ever figured out how much money that additional thing would cost? And then I'm sure the policymakers could figure out where to get that money once you figured out how much it was. But could you figure out how much money it would cost? And then we could go back and scratch our heads and say, hey, that's a great idea. I'm sure our agency would love to cough up that much money by ourselves without any cooperation with anybody else.
So a couple of things in that regard. One is for part of the network, the work that we're doing with the moving ahead process with Eugene is looking at what kind of a build out looks like in Eugene in terms of either it could be bus rapid transit, could be enhanced transit, but that more frequent service. And
are we talking hundreds of $1 million or
well,
under $1 million? I mean, I don't know.
The whole moving ahead package is several $100 million. But that's, and I'm raising that because there's two pieces to this. One is to get the service out there. The other is to have it be able to operate efficiently in congestion. Because if we're just pouring a bunch of money into service in congested corridors, that's not a good use of our collective resources. And so you need to think in both approaches are necessary to do that.
Okay, anybody else with comments, questions? Patty?
Thank you. Tom, I took the survey and I don't remember, I'm sorry, I don't remember, but anything about the fares, the cost of riding the bus in the survey. Do you remember if it was in there?
Did you take the survey in the first phase, or did you just take it recently?
First phase.
Yeah, so we didn't ask that question in that, but in this upcoming survey, it's more defined, and you'll get a chance.
I'm curious about, I personally think that your fares are very affordable. I think to be able to go to work for $50 a month is a really good deal. And I have family that get the half fare price right now for the passes. But so I'm wondering where the push or why that's on the table. Why are reduced fares on the table as part of the big discussion?
Right. Well, and there might be some other responses here, but I would say we have a lot of experience several years ago when we had the student transit pass and how successful that was in getting students to ride the bus. And there's two outcomes for that, right? One is you're getting more trips, being made by transit, but the other is you're building future transit riders. And so there's a good reason to have a focus on youth fares. With respect to low income, that $50 a month, that's a challenge. And so the extent that we can provide or make the service more affordable for low income folks, that can really help out in that regard.
And you think that will come out in this next survey, that it's, because you're asking about the fares, that people might ride the bus if it was lower fares?
That's part of it, yeah.
Do you want me to,
Yeah, sure.
and if I can provide more. So our board also is looking to fund our youth pass program and and provide more funding for low income program. But we also hear that despite meeting those criteria, if you don't fall in that category, the fare may still be a barrier towards riding public transportation. So although the board can take this approach towards low-income and youth funding at this time, what they're also looking at is some of the information from Transit Tomorrow, all this studying, will inform future decisions. So as the board in the future looks at more a comprehensive fare, is some of this information could inform. If people say, I don't fall in those groups, and I find that the $50 is not a barrier, then that's an opportunity for us to say, maybe that's not something we need to consider. But if people are saying, I don't fall within those groups, but the fare is a barrier, potentially the board could at some point take a future action to say, it's good to invest in more bus service, but if people can't ride them because fare is a barrier. So although we probably will not use the information to fund any additional that what we're doing right now, except for low income and students, it could inform future decisions for people who don't fall in those groups. And that's what our board has asked us to look at it more comprehensively for future funding.
Carl?
Well, thank you. And for all the reasons already mentioned, one of the things that we're also think is really important is that if you look at it from an individual standpoint, you pay a fare. But if you're going with a group like a family is going on a bus, that actually you have a disincentive to use it because you could hop into a car for a family of 4 and it would actually be cheaper than going on a bus paying 4 fares, even with a youth program. And so that's another thing we're looking into. We want to make sure this is accessible and inclusive so that whether you're 1 person, 4 people, you can all ride on the bus.
Commissioner?
With all the discussion on fares, I'm just curious, forgive me again, naivete, what percent of LTT's total budget comes from fares?
16 to 17%,
So
which is
that's
about
my
$6 to $7 million per year.
Okay. I mean, that's an interesting context. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, clarifications? All right, thank you very much. It's really interesting work. I'm really looking forward to the next chapter in this discussion. Okay, and now we are on to the Npo Obligation Report.
This is Dan Collister, LCOG. This is
Could you speak up, please?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm Dan Collister.
These don't, Mike, they don't amplify.
Well, if people watching at home may want me to speak up too, so I'll bring this up a little closer.
We all do.
Yes.
I'm presenting the annual listing of federal obligations for the Central Lane MPO for the federal fiscal year 2018. The report itself is attached, and is included in your packet. So federal law requires that all MPOs publish a list of federal obligations for the previous fiscal year, federal fiscal year, which is October to September, and that they publish that publicly and provide it to Federal Highways. This report satisfies that requirement. The data that I used to create this report was provided to me from ODOT as an extraction from FHWA's fiscal management system. So that provides me with FHWA numbers, but FTA numbers, I have to work with LTD to get those. And then using those numbers in cooperation with our partner agencies and local project managers to refine those numbers correct where necessary so that we're ensuring that we're reporting the best, most up-to-date numbers for that fiscal year. Some kind of high-level items of general interest. There were a total of just under $55 million of federal funds obligated in the MPO in the previous federal fiscal year. That's good. Obligation is good. It means that projects are moving forward, that project managers can start invoicing ODOT for their expenses for that. So it's some indication that work is moving forward, and we like to see a big number there. That number is higher than the previous couple of years, so it's good to see the number rising. There were obligations on a total of 41 projects. Those projects can be seen on page 5 and 6 of the report. It's also important to highlight that of those federal funds that were obligated, $4.5 million were obligated from the MPO's discretionary funds. which means that we're obligated, or at least last year, we obligated at about the rate that we received those funds, which is great to see, especially with ODOT has been concerned recently with projects being delayed, and they've been working with the NPOs to ensure that obligation takes place in a timely manner. So this is good for us to be able to report. I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have about this report. If you have questions about specific projects, I might defer to the local agencies.
Mayor?
So if this is maybe an ODOT question, that I'm assuming that the I-5 culverts between Woodburn and Goshen, that you're only counting, this number only counts ones that are within Central Lane, or this is?
Well, if the majority of the project is within our area, then the whole amount could be reported that way, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the case.
So some of it is outside of our area. Some of the culverts themselves will be outside of our area.
But the full dollar amount
But the full dollar amount.
is reported in our report.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, kind of, but I'm looking at it as, what the heck? How come we're paying for a Woodburn culverts? But I realize it's actually federal dollars and it's spread out.
There's no match required from you guys on this.
Okay, that was the bottom line question.
It's all on us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. So do we have to do anything here? This is just information. All right. Great. Thank you very much for that. Okay, next up, Interstate 105 update.
I realize they didn't open up these things, don't even know what they look like, or they're mapped. You might want to look at them, so I'll put up here. Just give me 1 second.
Let's see if this takes.
Not that one, there it is.
Everybody's looking up, it means you got to turn around.
Yeah, you might want to turn around. There's some slides, there's not a lot of them, but there's a few that you might want to look at. And I think Steve might have some other things to show us, so it'll be important to be able to see this. So again, I'm Franny Brindle. I'm the ODOT Area 5 Manager, which means I'm in charge of project development and construction on the state system in Lane County. And today, we are going to talk about a number of, I'm just going to introduce the fact that we've got a lot going on in the next few years between now and 2022. And then I wanted to focus on the I-105 project because it's right in the middle of everything. It's a big eyesore. It affects everybody and everything in our little area. So I wanted to just introduce you to my construction project manager, Steve Templin, who is in charge of administering the contract with Wildish Construction to do this work, this very important work. So what Steve does is he's in charge of all the inspectors, all the quality control, and all the contract requirements, and all the change orders, and making sure that all accountability for the funding occurs and that everything gets constructed to standard. It's very important. So can we go forward to the next slide? So, and you'll see that on that sideboard here and also one of the handouts, we've got it, and that's small, so don't worry about it, because you also have a handout in front of you, 2 different handouts. One that kind of shows a timeline of construction projects in the next few years, and then another that shows a map of the area with the highlighted, you can see where these construction projects actually occur. We've got a number of projects, 6 are right in front of you, that are up and coming, and the second one in line is the I-105 project. But you can see that there's some overlap of construction activities that are going to happen on our state system. We've been working really hard to make sure that we don't have too much of a mobility impact for these overlapping projects, but I will say that there may be some. The other big project besides the I-105 project that's coming up is the Delta at Beltline. That interchange project, that's the purple line there. We're working on phasing that project so that ramp closures that feed into, south to I-105 do not occur at the same time that we might have some ramps closed for the I-105 project. So that kind of logistical work is really important, and we're watching it closely. But as the projects progress, I will keep coming back to you guys, and we'll be talking about this stuff. And we'll talk about it as a high level, so you'll be able to see what's coming, and you'll be able to answer questions or point people in our direction if they have, the community, if they have questions or concerns. How's that? So with that, I want Steve to start talking about the I-105 Willamette River Bridge project. Steve?
Yeah, so good morning, everybody, or afternoon, I guess it is now. Thanks for having me. So I'm going to kind of keep this really high level, maybe offer some opportunity for questions like, what the heck are you guys really doing out there? Because that seemed to be...
That's what everybody asks us.
Yeah, why are you guys working in the daytime? Why are we being impacted? You guys are supposed to do all your work when we're sleeping. That's kind of the questions that we've been getting early on.
Pretty much it, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna kind of touch on those things rather than here's a piece of concrete and that kind of thing. So the I-105 Willamette River Bridge connections. This is one of the final interstates built, and it was built in the 60s. So it's about at its 50-year useful life. I think if any of you guys have been caught in the traffic impacts and looked down, the concrete, especially on the bridge over the Willamette River, is in really bad shape. That's a structural part of that particular bridge. So you look over the bridge rail, it's kind of fallen apart. It's old aluminum bridge rail. It doesn't meet current crash standards. Anyway, the bridge is ready for upgrades to current standards and really preserving what we have there in the way of the concrete and the safety and those kind of things. So the project is, we were developing this. If you remember last summer, we had the Beltline highway paving, and it looked so great, and we talked all about how we were going to do these weekend closures, and wham bam, it was done in a weekend. And then we kind of went into this, and people are like, why are you guys working during the week in the lane closure? So I want to, the project is kind of three different pieces of an overall project. So we've kind of, there's the north part, which is the Willamette River Bridge, which includes the off-ramp from Delta Highway or Valley River Center there on. So that's integral to that particular bridge, which makes it a real challenge. There's the middle piece, which we're probably within a few weeks of finishing right now. That's the removal of the old bridge that was going to go over the Roosevelt Parkway or the West Eugene Parkway or whatever it was way back when they originally built this. That bridge needed a lot of work. So rather than put a lot of money into a bridge that's not being used, we filled it up and we've replaced it with new concrete pavement. And then on the south end, which is really going to ruin everybody's life for this summer, we have all the ramps on and off of I-105 in and out of Eugene are going to get closed for some period of time to upgrade the decks, rails, all that stuff. No, I'm going to tell you, it's better than it was, because originally when they put out the plans and things, the traffic control plans had them closing multiple ramps, like 2 ramps at a time and single lane closure. It just wasn't very well organized. And we actually picked up on that in the construction office pretty early before you actually started. And we had been working on that for a few months of trying to really lessen the impacts to people, accelerate construction, some of those things. Working with Wilders have been great. So then we started the project. We started with the bridge removal. We got all this pushback, like, what the heck are you guys doing out there? Why are you messing with my life? So that kind of caused us to take another step back and say, boy, we did look at the traffic impacts. These aren't anything compared to what's going to be downtown. So we've been working the last few months on really honing down what we have to do in order to get the work done in the shortest period of time. So we are looking at acceleration and really speeding up some of the work where we have like ramp closures. We looked at doing, continuous construction in other places, and it's just not sustainable because there's just not people to work 24 hours. But we are looking at those places where we have ramp impacts and those things and trying to lessen the deal. So so the first closure that's coming up, and this is in the middle of March, so we haven't really set we've kind of started hinting to people in the construction updates, but we really haven't slapped them in the face yet and said, hey, this is gonna start happening on March 18th. But on March 18th, we're gonna close the 6th Street on-ramp to I-105. If you guys are familiar with that intersection, that's the least of that one has the least volume and the least impacts, we think, and well, this has the least volumes. But the reason we're closing this one for a couple of reasons. First, one, it's got the least volume, but since we're working on existing structures, it's kind of, if you guys have ever restored a car or worked on an old house, you start thinking, oh, this is gonna be easy, and then you tear something off and it's like, oh my God, this isn't what we expected. So it takes longer. So we're anticipating working out the bugs per se on this particular ramp closure because we're kind of doing the same thing on all of them. So we're headed towards March to do this particular ramp closure. We think it's going to be somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks that it's going to be closed. We're looking for opportunities to shrink that up, but we are going to use that information for the other ramps. So when we do have to close it, we'll at least know what we'll know what we should be running into and kind of have better prep for that stuff. So the detour for this ramp, a lot of people are going to use Coburg Road, and they have been. We can talk about that for a second, but the detour for the 6th on-ramp is all the way down to Chambers, take a left and back. And the reason, I think you and I probably wouldn't do that, but we have to sign for truck turning radiuses, and we're also talking to the city of Eugene a little bit. Their traffic folks are super smart. So we're talking about some different options to maybe encourage people to use some different routes rather than really plugging up 7th Street, which we know is already an issue. So the detour routes, each one's going to have its own detour route. We're going to be out about a month before we actually have these ramp closures to people and start talking to them about, we've already talked to them about the project, but like, no, this is going to close, this is how long, this is what we're doing, but, and then here's the detour. So that'll be coming up throughout this summer. We expect these ramp closures to start in March and be somewhat continuous through the summer. There might be a couple, 2 or 3 weeks in between them. But stay tuned. We're doing a really good job on Trip Check of telling people what's going on right now, what's coming up. And let's see. And then next summer we'll be going to the Willamette River Bridge. So that will be the ramp closure. There will be one ramp closure of the ramp from Delta to I-105. So from the Valley River there, that'll be closed for about, it was originally 26 weeks. Now we're thinking it's going to be closer to 6 to 8. It's the way that they're constructing the deck in those areas. I kind of mentioned the structure of the bridge. So let's see. I think that's kind of the high level part. Let me just kind of show you just a little bit about what we've been doing out there. If I can get the thing to come up. We've been documenting things as much as we can. So this is the old bridge that I mentioned that was supposed to go over the Roosevelt Parkway or the West Eugene Parkway. So we actually got in there and filled up underneath that bridge before we even started construction. So it would make it a lot, so we didn't have to wait so long to fill up here. I'm going to show you. I don't know if anybody ever even saw that bridge. You kind of have to go down to that the park down there and kind of poke around. And this is kind of where it was halfway full. We were filling it up with a concrete slurry type material, but what it did is it made it so rather than taking off the bridge and having to fill it all back in while traveling under it, we were able to fill probably 3/4 of it up with some lightweight fill, and it made it a lot quicker once we got up there. So not the best footages here, but anyway, I'm just going to kind of open it up for questions.
But before you do, yes, I wanted to talk about real quick. I'm heading the communications part of this project, which is we have the public information officers and other communication experts from LTD, ODOT, City of Eugene, to talk about how we're communicating and what we're communicating at what time to the public and how. We have Cogito on board for a lot of door-to-door canvassing, phone calling, information out to folks. And I'm also running a transportation options group. And we recently went to the Oregon Transportation Commission and got additional money for acceleration of construction. So we managed to get $750,000 additional dollars to entice and to work with Wildish to accelerate, especially the ramp projects, and a bunch of money for communication and also transportation options. So on my transportation options, I've got Teresa from Point to Point, I've got LTD at the table, City of Eugene, Safe Routes to School folks, and Cogito, and we're talking about, so just imagine what's happening with the congestion. This could be our future. We are not expanding our system. We're gonna have to start, people are gonna have to start looking at other modes of transportation. So this transportation option approach that we're taking is, let's see if we can entice people out of their vehicles, the single occupancy vehicles, try to get them to use buses, try to get them to use bicycles, especially during those summer months. We're trying to get a solidified schedule from the contractor by next month in March. And then we're gonna really target audiences and really work on specific campaign around park and rides for the bus or get on a bike. You know, think about it, we have 5 bridges that cross the Willamette to take cars and trucks. We have 5 pedestrian and bike bridges. That's 10 bridges total. So, one of the things we're doing at the Valley River Center is we put in a bike share facility at Valley River. It's gonna be deployed in March. That will be taking trips over the Valley River Bridge. It's a very beautiful ride right into the downtown area. You can get on a bus, get other places. There's plenty of parking at Valley River. You can get on a bike and go. So people that don't want to sit in traffic, when we have the off-ramp closure, that's going to be a problem, we have alternatives. We're also going to be reaching out to employers, see if we could get some of the Ninkasi Brewery people to take a different shift, get them off the regular peak hour of congestion trip. We'll be reaching out to the schools because we've got school parents taking kids to school over this bridge. There's a lot of outreach going to doctor's appointments for the physicians on Good Pasture Island Road and other places. So we're really wanting to target and teach people and entice people. Let's try a different way across the river here, and maybe it'll stick. And then as far as LTD, we know that Coburg Road has been heavily impacted for bus traffic as well with the congestion. So we're exploring different ways, you know, like what I heard just mentioned in Transit Tomorrow is it doesn't do a lot of good to put more buses on an already congested route. But maybe there's different things we could do around park and ride, or smaller buses in between the 2 buses, the buses that run the regular route. So we're still trying to figure that out. But I will also be reporting on what we're coming out. But the good news is we've got targeted funding, we've got really smart people that know transportation options speak and how to reach out to the community. And we're really gonna leverage that to the full hilt on this project. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor?
A couple of things. One, make sure you reach out to Congressman DeFazio early, lest we get another nasty letter. And we're going back to DC here pretty soon, so he's probably, will have.
Can I get you to
Yes,
take a
could you
packet
give
of
it, so
stuff?
to give him a heads up?
Yes, please, yeah.
Before he starts hearing from people.
I've been
and
talking
then-
to his Dan Whalen, his person.
Dan Whalen, yeah, but now he's chair
Yeah.
of that
Oh, yeah.
transportation committee. So not having mad constituents back here would probably help us out in terms of, you know, our part of the transportation world. The other thing is, you know, there's a lot of people encourage you to work with Springfield too, because there are so many folks that go back and forth, and probably even Covert, you know. People are working back and forth in the communities, and, you know, one of us is going, like me, who, you know, is gonna get out there and go, what the heck's going on out here? There's traffic all over, you know, that could have maybe made my trip at a different time, except for meetings like these. But, you know, those people that are employees and are going back and forth are going to get caught off guard coming from outside of Eugene. So make sure that our PIOs all know, and we can do what we can to mitigate you know, ask people to leave for work a little earlier during that time frame or something.
And we also have cameras on 6th and 7th Street that are now linked to Trip Check, and also cameras on Coburg Road. So when you go onto Trip Check, and that's what we're really preaching is know before you go, you can see actually the existing traffic conditions, and if you can see if it's red, yellow, or green, you know, if there's congestion. That helps looking, you know, out. But the rule of thumb is if you're traveling at the congestion in the morning or afternoon peak. And the other thing we're really trying to train people about is the zipper. The zipper move is working. And so we're hoping that can translate over to Beltline River Road someday. I don't know, but we'll see. The zipper.
Okay.
Yeah.
Zipper.
Yeah, so the first messaging that we put out was, hey, avoid the area, this is gonna be really bad, and everybody went to Coburg Road.
That's right.
Yeah, so the city wasn't quite prepared for that, and neither were we, you know, and so once we figured out, it's like, Coburg Road was really bad. It took me 25 minutes from Costco to 105 one night, so I couldn't believe it, but yeah, it was. Anyway, so they've timed the signals. Some of the cameras that Franny's talking about, they asked for 4 cameras to help with their signal timing, so as we do things, they'll have some additional information so they can make real-time tweaks to the signal timing. But what we've also now done is kind of change the messaging, like 105 might be your best way, because what we found in the first phase was everybody was just avoiding 105, and we zipped through there with no problem at all, and then Coburg Road is just snarled up, so anyway, it's going to change.
Okay, Gino and then Carl.
So November, December is fairly critical for many small businesses, even large businesses, that either makes them or breaks them. Are you doing anything different in those months to accommodate the fact that they need to keep their customer flow going during those months?
Yeah, one of the outcomes from our exercise, I'll call it, of kind of relooking at things was we've asked Wildish not to do any ramp closures during basically Thanksgiving to New Year's. So, because what happened this year is, you kind of know, some of you who are following closely, originally there was going to be a second closure of the Valley River ramp, and it just, because of Murphy's Law, it happened to be right during Christmas, so we started kind of telling everybody, and then everybody like really freaked out about it. So, like, this isn't so. I had a really smart staff that came up with an idea. That's why we actually have 2 southbound lanes right now. If you went through the last phase, you had that Valley River ramp and the through of 105. It was always snarled up there because everybody's trying to merge in, and it was a little bit dangerous. So we've now got 2 lanes going through there with some reflectors and some paint, and hopefully keeping people separated. But so the answer to your question is yes. We've told Wildish to not do that, please.
Okay. Carl?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Thank you for the safety improvement with the new striping and the 2 lanes going in that direction, the southwest or southbound, when you go over the river. Because there were a few days when that wasn't there, and I was concerned.
Yeah, no, it's putting down temporary paint, especially in the wintertime, is always a crapshoot. So we actually had them scheduled to come back about a week later, but it didn't even last a week. So and then we added the reflectors too. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Very informative. That's helpful. Oh, sorry, one more. Hold it. We have one more question that I didn't see.
Have a seat.
Nice try.
2 things. One, I was puzzled by your comment when you said, you were talking about not being able to do 24-hour construction because there wasn't, quote unquote, it wasn't enough people. And so I'm wondering, is it because of the people you've contracted work with to do the construction didn't have enough resources to be able to fulfill that public obligation, or is there a shortage of construction workers, or why is there, it's the same basic cost because you're doing the same amount of work but in a compacted time. So I'm trying to figure out where that shortage of staff is.
So there's a couple things going on. First, we didn't put out the contract and required accelerated work. We accelerated pieces of the work, but because it's a long-term project with a lot of concrete, and we just didn't say, hey, you've got to do this in a certain amount of time. We kind of left it up to the contractor to come up with that. So when we went back and looked at things, we looked at those areas, where can we really reduce the impacts to the public, and it all comes down to the ramp closures. as long as we have through lanes, as long as we can get people to merge in, the traffic seems to move through okay. It's not great. The second part of your question is overall the construction trade, like everywhere else, is hurting for qualified people right now. So even in their apprenticeship programs and things like that, they're having a hard time filling a lot of positions. So when I say it's not sustainable to work 24 hours, it's just because it's not a fluid thing. So when one group leaves for the day, and another group, if they're working on the same thing, it usually doesn't work. But what we do is we'll stagger, like the paving crew will be on at night and the rock crew will be on during the day. As long as they're doing kind of different work, we can keep them working continuously and not being in each other's way. But Wildishhead, they just don't have enough people to feed the job in that way.
So have you, I assume you've already incentivized short completion dates as opposed to and penalize long extended completion dates?
We don't have that. What we're doing right now is we're paying them extra to accelerate. So we'll be paying for the overtime and the additional mobilizations and that kind of thing to get, so it wasn't included in the original contract. So this is all part of the now, hey, by the way, we'd like you to accelerate piece that we came up with.
So if it's all one contract, or is it multiple contracts?
It's all one.
So maybe in the future.
Oh, yes.
If we,
Yeah. It's
we found
actually
it to be very, very successful, and they find people, they will hire their own subcontract, their own folks to get those incentivized rates and create a 24-hour project on their own.
Right. No, I definitely, and I think Brandy's probably told you Delta got pushed out a few months, and that's because some of the things that we're picking up on here, we said, wait, before we put Delta out, let's look at that and see where we can help things. We had ramp closures and things that were scheduled for that job that now we're finding other ways.
Thank you. And the second point I was going to raise, you made a comment that said that there's no plans in the future to increase, to have greater flow or increase on those highways, and you're going to go with bikes and buses or whatever. So are we saying that we're not going to, are we going to deny the fact that this area may be getting larger with a greater population, even though you incentivize with buses and bikes? Are we saying now that we're not going to increase the capacity of the roads based on some other theory?
What I'm saying is I don't have construction funding right now for any expansion of the facility. We have, Beltline, we have a planning study, or not more than, actually an environmental study for phase 2 that would expand that facility to 3 lanes in each direction between River Road and Coburn. Delta Road and River Road. That's the only project that I see that's making plans for expansion.
It's concerning.
We have a needs list, but we don't have anything.
I mean, it's concerning when you have a prospective large employer looking at this area to move in and whatnot. They look at the flow of traffic and the ability for their staff to come in to work for them, and how ease of getting back and forth to work. And if this area is jammed up, it may keep some of those larger employers or potential employers out of this area.
Well, actually, as I looked at what we have existing for our facilities, we have a lower commute as a large city than most cities around this region anyway. If we look at Seattle, Portland, whatever, our average commute time is about 16 minutes. It might be mean, not average, but I just looked this up because I was going to the OTC. That's lower than many other cities this size.
I'm just looking into the future.
Into the future is a concern.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now we really will release you. Oh, no, we won't.
Just one quick thing. On the Lane Workforce Partnership, which I have recently left the board of, Commissioner Burney's my successor there, and Mayor Lundberg is still active on it. We learned that there was such a significant shortage of CDL drivers in Lane County that the Lane Workforce Partnership had an accelerated CDL learning program because there were so many jobs, and they are very high-paying jobs, $60,000, $70,000 a year, and that is still a unfulfilled demand that exists, and that is separate from, but certainly related to, the issues connected to your construction work.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just doing a little time check because we have 35 minutes left of agenda items and we have 15 minutes left. So
So we would like to propose postponing item G, the Safe Lane Coalition update, to the next meeting.
okay. All right, thank you. That sounds sensible. Sorry about that to the Safe Lane folks. Safe routes to school.
Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Brand, and I'm the Transportation Options Manager at Point to Point at LTD. Along with me is Gilly Garber-Yance. He is the School Transportation Options Specialist who works for us and also supports the Regional Safe Routes to Schools program. There are a number of dedicated local professionals whose time is dedicated to support this program. Some of them are at LTD, some of them work for the City of Eugene at the River House. They work in Willamette Lane, and then we also receive some intern support from the Lane Council of Governments. This program that we've initiated in the area, it's based on a national model, and it was founded by a group of dedicated parents at Monroe Middle School, a principal and Point to Point, where we wrote the original grant in 2006 to establish the first program in 4J. And then over the last 12 years, we've written subsequent grants to move on to establish a program at Bethel, and then now at Springfield, and so we have a very large regional program. This is a very unique model throughout the country. In fact, we've spoken at a number of conferences about how we put all this together. People are very interested in kind of how we did it and also how we got the money to do it. We have received a variety of different funding mechanisms for the program. It's received regional, state, federal, and some foundation grants, and a number of those asks have come here before you over the last 10 years. These together have been about over $1 million for this work. We know from national research that this investment in Safe Routes to Schools programs yields numerous benefits to youth, including encouraging active transportation behaviors, helping to fight obesity, and establishing lifelong safety habits.
So before I tell you a little bit about what we've been doing and where we're going, I want to frame what we've done by the 6 E's of Safe Routes to School. If you're not familiar with them, here they are. These are the areas that we focus our programming and our work around. They're engineering, encouragement, evaluation, education, enforcement, and the 6th E is equity. Equity is the underlying E, and this is how our strategic plan is built out, and there are equity initiatives in each one of the other E action items. So some recent accomplishments for the regional SRTS program is we recently increased our encouragement events by 50%. We recently got 2 Safe Routes to School FTE assistants who are on the org chart, and they were hired to help us with our encouragement events. Some of these encouragement events, if you're not familiar, are bike rodeos, where kids come. It's a family event, usually held after school. This girl is at one of them where they have smoothies, they learn to ride bikes, they practice riding bikes in a traffic garden, which is a space for them to use the skills they learn in the education programs. We also have the assistants help us with the walking school buses, which is where kids use pedestrian infrastructure in the mornings to walk to and from school. Another recent accomplishment is the Jane Higdon Foundation recently gave us a 5-year, $30,000 per year commitment for our bicycle safety education program. This is good because we have in the past had to be reapplying each year. We also obtained $75,000 in CMAQ funding for bike parking improvements. Some of these have actually been installed, and we're waiting on delivery for the rest of them. We have worked with LCOG and Lane County regional partners to obtain and deploy rotating speed readers. The Safe Routes to School coordinators helped identify sites where these speed readers would be most helpful to mitigate traffic concerns. We also prioritize programming for Title I schools. This looks like anytime we roll out a new program or get new resources, that the Title I schools are the first to be considered to get those programs or resources. And finally, we just held our 3rd advisory committee meeting, which was focused on data and evaluation. We went over the data collection that we are currently doing and decided what to keep, what to get rid of, and how we can refine those efforts. A project that's come out of this is our need for more qualitative data. So we'll be collecting more qualitative data and maintaining that data with an intern coming up here. Some great numbers to see are 4,908 children from fall 2017 to spring 2018 were in our bicycle and pedestrian safety education classes. One number that I would like to call out is the 3,503 that received pedestrian safety education. Our school district 4J recently had the PE teachers take on the pedestrian safety education portion of our program, which really boosted the numbers of students receiving that education. Unfortunately, the other districts do not have full-time PE teachers, and this is not something that's consistent across the country. So we're looking at other creative ways to increase those pedestrian safety education numbers in the other districts as well. Last May, we had 43 schools participate in May's Walk Month and SRTS programming, which resulted in 15,070 students taking over 21,000 active transportation trips. This number increased in October to 47 schools who participated in the October's Walk Month, with 15,581 students walking or rolling to school. And these were the highest numbers that SRTS has had in our program history, so we're excited about that. We will also be looking to continue this momentum as we start our backwards planning process for May's Bike Month coming up here. So, where we're headed, our continuing efforts with the creation of a crossing guard program, which is being spearheaded in Springfield. Right now it consists of case studies and a review of the needs in our current system so that when the time comes we can strategically approach that issue. We've continued the pedestrian safety and bicycle safety program expansion. One notable thing here is that Willamette Lane has just taken on the Springfield bicycle safety education program, and we'll be excited to see how that goes coming up in the new season. We are also in the beginning phase of organizing a regional training around equity and messaging. We're talking to a professor at the U of O about how to run a workshop for our staff on how we can better invite diverse communities to our events and our programming that we're doing. And then finally, we continue to focus on grant and sponsor funding for different aspects of the regional program to grow our capacity. So the last thing I'd like to leave you with is a testimonial. This is one of the first that's come out of our qualitative data collection that we're doing. This is a family in Springfield that has come to multiple Safe Routes to School events. Everyone in the family rides a bike, and we first met them in 2017 when they came to a special event to support homeless families where we were handing out lights and teaching safety skills to these cyclists. 1 year later, they were able to secure permanent housing and transitioned out of a transitional housing tiny house village. And they were at a bike rodeo, and I was actually at this event where we got to give them, thanks to a partnership with Burley and Safe Kids West, we gave them all free helmets and this Burley trailer so they can make better use of their active transportation modes. So we would like to thank all of our partners, both in the room and out of the room, for making all this possible and your continued support. Thank you, and ready for any questions.
Thank you very much. It's a wonderful report. Thank you. And Mayor?
I'm just going to make a few comments. One, I'm very happy that Willamette Lane is participating because they're the perfect one to do some of these activities. And they have a ton of kids that go through their style programs. I'm really focused on infrastructure, that we make infrastructure connectivity improvements, because there's nothing like barriers that prevent, a parent from feeling good about kids out there trying to, navigate around, try to get to school, that they're safe. I'm very happy to see MAC funds are going to this since we lobbied for them so heavily. And I know where's Jeannie? That we have speed readers too. That, what I wish they had is out on the freeway, not that slow down ever flashed when I was on the freeway, but there's nothing like having slow down on top of it when you're going too fast, and every car behind you can see that you're the one going too fast. So it would be great if we can get to the point where we can have that slow down as part of the fact that you are not going 20 or 25, you're going 30, and you should not, you know, for those that ignore the speed reader. So I'm hoping we get to that point, but the speed readers, I think, are also a great way to help people notice that that's a specific zone. And I know, maybe we won't get to the Ampo report, but definitely it's being discussed at the state level, is that we encourage cameras. And so the minute there's going to, you know, if that becomes where we have cameras also, and people start getting tickets, you know, one, it's not gonna be popular, and two, it's, you know, can we encourage people before we get, you know, before that moment where we're going to have, perhaps have cameras.
One brief comment about infrastructure. The 3 coordinators work with the local jurisdictions to evaluate infrastructure close to the schools, and over the last few years, they have prioritized those in a tool that they created, and they are sharing that with the transportation planners, who also have put in a number of projects for state funding. Some of them will be funded, but that's an ongoing process now that we have dedicated infrastructure funds for safe routes, and so that's something that will continually be improved, and it's on the radar of all of the transportation planners in the region, you know, connected to Vision Zero and all those things that we all care about.
Great, great. So, good work.
That is great. Yeah, Commissioner.
Commissioner, couple of questions. One, do you have classrooms compete with other classrooms in the same school to see who puts in more bike miles, more walking miles, much less schools with other schools in the same district and districts in the county? Do you have that kind of competition going on?
So it's done informally. You know, it's not really done classroom to classroom that I'm aware of, but I know that the teachers will have like little stickers that'll say, how'd you get to school today? And it'll be for people to show each other in the classroom how it's done. I'm not sure if they're doing it classroom to classroom. Maybe Lawton can answer this.
Yeah, Lawton, Safe Routes to School Coordinator in Springfield. It varies school by school. Sometimes we find more of a collaborative message to be more effective, but certainly throughout the country, there's plenty of examples of competitive models. I think one that we've been talking about doing is more of a school-to-school type competition to kind of engage the whole school district, and we in our region have not used a competitive model thus far.
Thank you. And the reason I asked is because before I retired from my business, and we were doing a lot of electric retrofits and solar installations on public schools, and where there was that competition, it tended to increase 3 times the numbers. And so that was why I asked. And the second question is, in your websites or through your materials, do you ever quantify the equivalent carbon savings of how many trees that would plant, how many cars off the road that would be the equivalent of, things of that nature? Do you do that?
You know, we do it for the Business Community Challenge, but I don't think we've done it in force on safe routes, but we could. We know that if we can estimate the time period that people are using active transportation, and then use a health calculator to figure out how far, how many pounds they reduce of their own pounds, but also with the distance, we can probably figure out the savings.
Yeah, there are ways to, I'm only talking here because
We can talk
I know
offline
this
about
much
that,
of
though.
this one,
That could
right?
be interesting.
But there are ways to do that, and that creates a really wonderful public impact statement that you can then use to continue to encourage.
Great suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Thank you all very much. It's nice to wrap up on such a high note.
Thank you so much for all your
It's really
support.
great,
Really makes
really
a
great.
difference.
And so the last item here is 8 pieces. Is there anything that we absolutely should touch on in our last 2 minutes here?
I'd like to say
Those
just a
updates?
couple of words
Okay,
about maybe
please.
the legislative piece.
Please.
I put one of these at each of your places. There's more in the back. This is very early in the legislative session for Oregon, and I have just compiled bills that are primarily transportation-related and of interest to the NPO. There's a ton of other transportation bills that I didn't put on here. There's many around the transport of oil, for instance, a lot of other things. These are in no particular order. As of yesterday, they are pretty much all referred to committee, which means they're still alive. I will note a couple in particular. On page 3 of 6, there are two bills. Senate Bill 559, the second one down, would expand the use of photo radar. I think that's just something around the safety issue. The last one on that page 3 is something related to safe routes to schools. There's the new funding that's come out recently, and in its first round, it has a requirement of 40% or 20% match. There is a bill to reduce that match requirement because that many people think that's too high of a match requirement and is onerous. On page 4, I'll just note that there's another photo radar bill, the second one down. The fourth one down, Senate Bill 59, there is a Connect Oregon bill, which many of you remember we've had that for many, many years, but Connect Oregon, this past biennium, had dedicated funding towards transload facilities, freight from truck to rail, and there was no competitive program. This bill would reintroduce funding for a competitive program. We do know that the co-chairs are targeting $100 million, but as of earlier this week, they said they only have about 20 million of that lined up. So that's still going to be a stretch to get significant funding in there. The last one on page 4 is just dropped last week, jurisdictional transfer. So there's a significant bill around jurisdictional transfer that many of your jurisdictions may be interested in. Page 5 is almost entirely dedicated to the carbon bill, which just formally became a bill earlier this week. That also notes at the bottom of page 5 two pieces of legislation that have not been introduced yet, but that we are expecting to be introduced. Page 6 has two bills that aren't really transportation, but there are a number of bills in this session that have been introduced around housing and affordable housing, and I only listed 2 of these because if any of these, a lot of them, these 2 in particular, tend to focus on allowing more housing outside of the UGBs, and if these became law, you could have transportation impacts of some significance, so I put them in here. Page 2, I'm going to just half-jokingly note that HB 2112, the third one down, or the next to last one, the speed pump bill. There are actually a number of speed pump bills introduced. Those are not really speed bump bills. Those are what we call placeholders for gut and stuff. In other words, there's about 1 paragraph talking about speed bump legislation, and that could be wiped out and amended to be something else entirely next week or next month or 2 months from now. There's a lot in flux is what I'm saying. It's still very early in the session. I'll finish by saying what we heard at the Oregon Transportation Forum on Monday this week from the co-chairs of the Joint Transportation Committee, Senator Beyer and Representative McEwen, is that Senator Beyer was specifically saying there are more big issues in this session than he's ever seen during his time in the legislature, between PERS, education, healthcare, carbon, and a number of other things. And that both of them said that so far they don't know how things are going to turn out. They're very concerned that nobody's going to be happy because the Democrats have 2/3 majority in both houses or both chambers. So there's a segment of the Democratic caucus that believes they're going to get everything they want, and they're going to be disappointed. And on the other end, they'll be disappointed for the opposite reason. So there's just a lot of uncertainty. We'll keep you updated with this. If you got this electronically or it's posted electronically online, every one of these has a link to the bill if you want to follow up on it. So every one of those bill numbers is a link online. You can follow the legislation. You can actually sign up to receive updates on it yourself. We'll update you every month.
Great. Thank you very much, and we will have to close because our time is limited. Next meeting, March 7th in Eugene in the Public Library. So thank you all. We're adjourned.